Tune into Nice Radio every Saturday at 7:30 a.m. for A View from the Outside, hosted by Brereton Horne. A View from the Outside takes a look at key issues affecting St. Vincent and the Grenadines and gives a global perspective on how these issues are viewed. Host Brereton Horne will examine a variety of topics to enlighten, stimulate debate, and explore solutions. Hear the facts, hear the real-life stories, hear A View from the Outside. Join Brereton Horne at 7:30 a.m. every Saturday on Nice Radio for A View from the Outside.
This society needs a spectacle. It might help us to see some people. On A View from the Outside this week being the 21st of August 2021, we look at alarm, A-L-A-R-M, alarm, with the view being that Vincentians must be encouraged not to continue to miss the warning signs, but instead to look out for the alarm, listen to the sound of the alarm, and take action to effect change for the betterment of the country. The Merriam-Webster Dictionary defines alarm as a signal, such as a loud noise or flashing light, that warns or alerts. That definition tells us that alarm is a sign, which is an indication to act on information. An alarm provides a warning, which gives an indication to be careful because there is possible danger or problem ahead. The definition tells us that alarm is an alert, which provides notification to be vigilant. It is in the context of that definition and an assessment of the performance of the regime over time that we, here on A View from the Outside, encourage all Vincentians to be alert, be on guard, and not to continue to miss the alarm when the signs are presented. Over the years, and on a diversity of issues, Vincentians have had the alarm bell rung. The wake-up call was given, and there have been many occasions when Vincentians ought to have said, enough is enough, and enough no more. However, the alarm went unheeded, and as a result, the regime in St. Vincent and the Grenadines continues to limp from year to year and from term to term, much to the detriment of progress in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. It is not possible in any one program to mention all of the instances when the alarm was sounded. However, we will give some examples in no particular order of occurrence, which will encourage you, the listener, to continue the exercise of identifying others, identify and discuss them with a view never to repeat the mistake of leaving them unheeded again. The tagline, tough on crime and the causes of crime, ought to jog your memory. Yes, that was the slogan which the ULP plagiarized from the then Tony Blair Labour Party government in the United Kingdom. That was the tagline which they used to bamboozle and hoodwink the Vincentian people and propel their way into government. Once in government, they increased and extended the police force and created an arm which is notoriously referred to as the Black Squad. It is no secret that since they have been in government, crime, especially serious crime, has been escalating out of control. The murder rate has escalated out of control, and in 1 year alone, the number hit the 40s. This year, 2021, the number is already past the mid-20s, and there are still 4 more months to go in the year. Robberies and burglaries increased, and citizens are attacked, seriously wounded, and some killed in their own homes, seemingly with no solution and no redress. Predial larceny, where farmers' produce and livestock are stolen with disdain. and where farmers find themselves at the mercy of thieves. Again, with the farmers seeming to have little or no redress. Vincentians, the regime has had 20 plus years to fix the crime situation in the country. But rather than fixing it, it gets worse and worse, and the alarm bell in relation to crime continues to be rung. When they got into power, they started the chatter that agriculture is a thing of the past. Some even likened agriculture to the days of Columbus, when they touted tourism as the way forward. Dismantling agriculture and denying the Vincentian people food security was an alarm. Another alarm was when diseases went untreated and when crops were allowed to be destroyed. Well, since then, agriculture has taken and continues to take a battering. A once vibrant, thriving sector has been reduced to shambles. Farmers, a once independent group in the country, have now been relegated to queuing up for poor relief. Their independence has been snuffed out. No one seems to have paid any or sufficient attention in relation to the farmers when the alarm was sounded. And many of those farmers are now living in extreme poverty, which Dr. Ralph Gonsalves told the United Nations and the rest of the world exists in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Since then, the food import bill of the country has skyrocketed out of control, and there is now another chatter of reducing that colossal spending. Once they got into power, also, it became clear, the alarm was sounded, that one of their primary objectives was to snuff out independence and independent thought. As far as thought is concerned, the alarm was sounded when they debased and publicly shamed in the parliament of the country and on the airwaves anyone who showed any independent thought, especially if that thought runs contrary to the regime. They set about and succeeded in emasculating some of the men whom they saw as being in positions of influence, especially those in charge of organizations. A corollary to that is that voluntary community organizations, which flourished prior to the advent of the ULP government, are now all but non-existent. The National Youth Council, the NYC, which was seen as a production mill for the nurturing of young leaders in the country, is no longer. It has been disbanded altogether. One of the most disconcerting things about that is that some of the very ministers of government, of this government, are beneficiaries of the very NYC. The alarm was sounded there. And so, over time, the alarm continues to be sounded in so many ways. And it is in that regard that every Vincentian is encouraged to pay attention. Pay attention to the alarm in relation to the undermining and erosion of the rule of law in the country. Too much damage has been done in that regard already. There is the alarm in relation to PACE. That alarm was sounded. The Police and Criminal Evidence Act, PACE, P-A-C-E, that piece of legislation which governed the behavior of the police during an investigation, was abolished. Many believe that since then, since PACE was abolished, the police have been behaving wantonly and with very little regard to due process. Pay attention to the alarm pertaining to justice or the lack thereof in the country. Look at how some people are treated when compared to others as far as justice is concerned. Do not ignore the alarm. Continue the quest for justice for Cornelius John. Continue the quest for justice for Anna Mae Lewis. Continue the quest for justice for Michelle Andrews. Continue the quest for justice for Yogi Farrell. Continue the quest for justice for Margaret Parsons. Continue the quest for justice for all of the women who have been denigrated and degraded. Continue the quest for justice for Adriana King. Continue the quest for justice for Kenson King. Continue the quest for justice for each and every Vincentian for whom justice remains in short supply, including Bigger Biggs and Marcus de Freitas. Do not ignore the alarm. Demand that the law works for all Vincentians, not just those who are well connected to the ruling regime. Pay attention to the alarm sounded by the accusations of corruption leveled at the regime. Do not forget the attempts to deposit $1 million in cash in the Accountant General's account. That is, the account of the people of St. Vincent and the Grenadines. And to date, no explanation of the source of funds has been given. Do not forget the allegations of millions of dollars held in U.S. bank accounts by those in the upper echelons of the regime. Do not forget investigations were promised, but none to date has been delivered. No conclusion given. Do not forget the large sums revealed as being held by Vincentians, which were revealed in the Panama Papers. It is important that you do not ignore the alarm sounded by the newspaper headlines internationally that St. Vincent and the Grenadines is the haven for money laundering. Pay attention to the alarm sounded by the lack of accountability in the country. Pay attention to the regime's blatant disregard for the Constitution, the highest law of the land, under which they are obligated to be accountable to the people. There is still no accountability for the construction of the Argyle International Airport. There is still no accountability for the spending of Petrocary money. And the list goes on. It is here that you must listen to the alarm and demand accountability for the missing $95 million, which the Director of Audit states is unaccounted for and for which no proper explanation is given. Demand transparency and accountability for the accounts to be audited, not 5 or 6 years later, but on time. Do not ignore the alarm. Pay attention to the alarm which alerts you that there is move afoot to silence you and to take away your right to protest. That alarm has been sounded. They now resort to a piece of legislation, a piece of colonial legislation, the Public Order Act 1951, to try to silence you. Know that protest is a right that you have, which is enshrined in the Constitution of St. Grenadines, the highest law of the land. Do not ignore that alarm and do not surrender your right. Consider that as your final alarm and know that if you let it go unheeded, the nation will be muzzled and muted altogether forever. And you will become mere voting cattle of the type seen in authoritarian countries around the world. Pay attention when the alarm is sounded by public servants. Pay attention to to the alarm which is currently sounded in the tourism authority by an employee of that institution. And pay attention to the alarm sounded when the chief executive officer of that institution said that the spending of monies in that institution is not the people's business. It's none of your business. Pay attention, Vincentians. Pay attention to the alarm which has been sounded by a former diplomat of the regime who recently urged Vincentians to reject the regime and their policies. Pay attention to the alarm sounded by the change in the law, the Public Health Act, to take away your right as Vincentians to choose what is injected into your bodies. Be aware of attempts to hoodwink and bamboozle you into thinking that the change does not make it mandatory. Think about it. If the change has been made so that it is no longer voluntary, then surely it suggests that it is mandatory. It's not for all, certainly for those who are targeted at any one time. Today, you may not be in the target group, but rest assured that if you do not heed the sound of the alarm, tomorrow it will be you. Do not ignore that alarm. It can have devastating consequences. And, as said above, the plethora of alarms which have been sounded across the nation of St. Vincent and the Grenadines is simply too much to be dealt with in this program today. So, we, here on A View from the Outside, now encourage you to continue to identify the various instances of alarm. And once you identify them, discuss them with your family and friends and colleagues and ensure that you do not continue to ignore them. Do not ignore the alarm sounded by the regime's failure over 20 plus years to improve healthcare in the country. You know, because they told us that healthcare is not as much a priority as their leadership. The alarm is forever being sounded by the lack of basic medication and supplies. The alarm is forever being sounded by the state of disrepair and the unsanitary surroundings which exist at the Milton K2 Hospital. Do not ignore the alarm which is constantly being raised when those in the upper echelons of government, including the Prime Minister and members of his family, fly out at will for medical attention, while you, the ordinary citizen of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, have to accept the substandard conditions which exist at home. Ensure that you take steps to let your voice be heard. Register your opposition and issues highlighted by these alarms. Register your rejection to those issues. Go on the protest line if you have to. Go if you must. Go and ensure that you raise the alarm to do your bit to bring about better for St. Vincent and the Grenadines. And as you do that, we encourage you to remember that the regime has shown Vincentians time and again who they are. Remember also the words of a woman, a phenomenal woman, a human rights and social rights activist, a woman with a rich legacy of advocating for and on behalf of other women. A woman who was never afraid to speak up and speak out about the plight of the oppressed and dispossessed. That woman is Maya Angelou. She said, when someone shows you who they are, believe them. Justin and all of the listeners, this is Brereton Horne with a reminder to send your feedback as usual to isviewfromtheoutside@hotmail.com. We also invite you to visit and like our Facebook page at A View from the Outside. And we encourage you to subscribe to our YouTube channel at JMB Horne. Have a pleasant Saturday, have a wonderful Sunday, and a productive week ahead, where we all make the effort to heed the sound of the various alarms.